This here is the GTX 560. This is a card from NVIDIA that launched 13 years ago. How crazy is that? The GTX 500 series from NVIDIA, yeah, launched, as I said, in 2011, actually at the end of 2010, but this guy launched in 2011. And it has 1 gigabyte of VRAM, has 1 gigabyte of GDDR5, which is pretty low to today's standards, but again, back in 2011, this was not too bad of a card. In fact, this was the best version of the GTX 560, and I'll explain why in a second. But before I do, my name is Gray. I'm a CompTIA certified IT technician, as well as just a computer enthusiast, like many of you watching probably are. And like I said, this is the GTX 560. I got this not too long ago, used. And this is a pretty cool card, actually. And you know what? Surprisingly, with only 1 gig of VRAM, it still runs like a truck. I'm really surprised at how well this thing still runs, even some modern things. But we'll get into that in the benchmarks in a little bit. But first, I want to just kind of take a look at the card here. So again, this is a standard 2-slot card. We have some dinosaur ports on here. Oh my gosh, we'll talk about that again in a second. The Asus card here, this is the direct CU2 version. Like I said, this is the best version of the card you could get. So even though you could get 2 gigabyte versions, they were only made by EVGA actually, but the cooling solution was nowhere near as good. The clock speed was nowhere near as good as this one was. And overall, even though, yes, having that extra gigabyte of VRAM was helpful, it actually didn't end up helping in the long run, because this guy's going to have better GPU clock, shader clock, memory clock. Essentially, everything is going to be turned up from the factory. So it's, as it says in the name, Direct CU2. That's their cooling solution. This is one of the craziest coolers that you could find for a 560. The rest of them usually were 1 fan and or a terrible cooling solution. So it's 2 fans, but it has like just an aluminum heat stack. But we'll take a look at the cooling just in a second when we get to the teardown. But here's a little size comparison. So here I have a GTX 580. So this is the same line. In fact, it's the exact same card, but it's the GTX 580. So this is going to be the higher end. Obviously, this is the second to highest version of the 500 cards. There was a GTX 590 above it, but that was really pretty limited production, much more expensive, not super available. So this is, in all realism sorts, going to be the most accessible, highest end card from the 500 series. Like I said, I have both of the Asus Direct CU2 versions of these cards. This is going to be in a separate video, though, so don't get too hung up on this 580 here. This is really just for a size comparison. You can see the back here of the 2 cards. So definitely quite a difference, but like I said, Asus really went to town on these coolers. The Asus cards have always been known as the best, really. Okay, I guess maybe that's an opinion. That's an opinion and a half, but I always consider the Asus cards to be the best. I have a Strix 3070 Ti, and I love it so much. Now, this is actually before the Strix line started coming out. This was typically regarded as the highest version, or the highest end version for the 500 series. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about this card real quick. So the GPU clock, the shader clock, the memory clock, pixel rate, texture rate, the FP32, and FP64 were all raised over the standard model from NVIDIA. All around 5 to 6% raised from the factory. That's pretty big. That's a big deal. As well as the cooling solution on here was way better than they needed to be. Now, yes, the Fermi 2 architecture was pretty power hungry. It has a TDP of 150 watts, which for a card in 2011, that's that's pretty sizable, especially for a 60 series. Another thing that's notable is that, nowadays we like to think of the 60 series for NVIDIA as a pretty low-end card, pretty entry-level. And not to say that this was, necessarily coveted as the best in 2011, but this was pretty high mid-range. The GTX 500 series had quite a bit of cards. I think it had 4 or 5 cards before this guy that were lower. And then, of course, the 560 Ti, 570, 580, and the 590. And there were little kind of things in between there. But let's go ahead and get down to the teardown so we can kind of see what we're looking at from the board perspective here. I've not opened this GPU yet. Again, I got this used a while ago, but I have not opened this guy. So let's go ahead and see what we got here. We have four screws here. These are standard Phillips. I'm using my iFixit toolkit. I love this toolkit. I've owned this for years, and I've never had any issues with it. You can get a full toolkit for, I don't know, probably $70 now. But we should be good here to just, yep. Oh, we have a fan connector on there, but that's okay. I'm not even going to worry about that right now. Okay, so aside from the fact that, holy moly, that thermal paste is terrible and a little crusty. This is a 13-year-old card. I guess you can give it some slack, but man, that's a bad paste job. Let's see what we're looking at here. We have a little bit of dust down here, collection of dirt, but again, 13 years old card, and it's used. I'm not going to give it too much slack. Yeah, I mean, this cooling solution is crazy. So we have direct copper heat pipes, which are going, we have 3 of them here that have direct contact with the actual GPU itself. I mean, that's awesome. These heat pipes are going to be great, and they're going through, looks like a pretty, it's interesting here. We have kind of a two-part system here. So we have a pretty dense aluminum block up here, kind of right next to everything important. You know, the memory modules as well as our actual GPU die there. But then we have a really pretty dense fin stack over here. The heat pipes then are cooled off from. Again, from the fans. Yeah, this fan's a little thicker than this one is. That's interesting. But yeah, I mean, just a lot went into this cooler. You can tell this is, I mean, it's pretty overkill for this card, honestly. It's definitely going to do the job. You can see we even have heat sinks on our power delivery here. That's awesome to see. We also have really high quality power delivery here. That's another thing with Asus. They've always been really good at power delivery. They use really high quality parts of power delivery. We have our memory modules here. Looks like, yeah, so these are all Samsung modules. Yeah, I mean, this is all such high quality parts. Looks like nothing's out of place here. Everything's where it should be. We do have our 2 power connectors here. This card does use 2 6-pin power connectors, which is pretty cool. And then let's see, we have our SLI teeth up here. You're never gonna SLI this card, but cool. That's pretty cool. Let me get this cooler thing back on. I got the cooler back on here. As I was saying, we have 2 6-pin power connectors here. That's cool. You know, again, TDP of 150 watts. They suggest a PSU of 450 watts. That's pretty cool. Again, that's, you know, overkill for what you're going to need for this. However, you know, a lot of the times when you're running overclocked stuff, you do want more headroom than that. Let's go and look at the ports on here. We have 2 DVI slots here. Those are pretty ancient. And then a mini HDMI here. Now, the DVI ports here, I want to say that they were continued through the Pascal generation. I know that they were on all the 10 series cards, but I can't remember if they were on the 20 series cards or not. Anyway, but oh, looks like it was. I mean, you can see that there's a screw stuck in there. That's pretty crazy. Here's a little closer look at the card. It's a little beat up, you know, it is used, but it's in pretty good condition actually. There's a little bit of dirt on here, but nothing too crazy. Here's the back here. All right, so for PCIe here, we do have a full-size PCIe, which I'm very glad. I've dealt with a lot of these older cards that only have like by 8 or something stupid on here. But this is going to be using PCIe 2.0. So again, this is what we expect for a 13-year-old card. Let's go ahead and get into the benchmark. All right, we have the GTX 560 all plugged in here to the test bench. Now in here we have a Ryzen 7 2700X. We do have a dinky little cooler on there, but we're not going to be using much of that CPU, so we really don't need to worry about cooling. We have 16 gigs of DDR4 on here, and then this is all plugged into an ASRock A320 motherboard. We are running this on a 535 watt PSU, so that's going to be totally fine for what we need. And then it's also on an SSD here running Windows 11. You can see I'm getting drivers installed. We'll see how this goes, and then we'll get right into the benchmarks. All right, so first things first, we have a game called The Forest. Now, this is not a super well-known game, but it's one of the best ones that I like to benchmark just because it has such a wide range of GPUs you can play on it, and it has a wide range of how it can look as well. So right now we're running on the lowest settings at 1280 by 1024. So this is the max resolution of this monitor, but honestly, we're running a GTX 560, so realistically, this is going to be totally time correct. We have everything on the lowest that we can be at. Now, the biggest thing that we're going to realize here is our GPU VRAM limitation. So we do have it at a quarter resolution for our texture quality, but as soon as we bump that up to maybe half resolution for our texture, we're going to see that 1 gigabyte of VRAM really start to become a limitation here. Now, as I'm kind of running around here after this plane crash, we can see that we are absolutely in playable range. You know, we're at just under 60 FPS. We are at 100% GPU utilization, but we're under 70 degrees Celsius, which is totally great. This is totally fine for GPUs. I really wouldn't start worrying about a GPU temperature until it gets up to the 78, 79 range. That's when it starts to become maybe a little unacceptable. But yeah, as you can see here, we're running into that limit of our memory here. Now I'm going to turn it back to quarter resolution just because that's how you're really going to be able to get some performance out of here. So now you can see, now we're just at that 60 FPS mark. I mean, this is super playable. This is at full resolution for the monitor, so this is going to be totally fine. You'll be able to do kind of everything that you want to do here. Now, as soon as you want to maybe, let's say, go to medium settings, we're probably going to be looking at a little bit of less performance, of course. So even if we just do a little bit there, yeah, so now we're going to be looking at the mid 40s kind of thing. You can see our GPU is just pegged at 100% utilization right now, which is totally fine. Again, this is definitely a playable experience at full resolution. Again, this is 1024, however. But this is totally playable. Let's move on to the next game on this list is actually going to be PUBG. Now, this is not a game that's typically put on these kind of videos where we're testing hardware. But one of the things that I've found most prominent in my personal testing is that just like The Forest, which is the last game we looked at, PUBG does a really good job of showing the different range of GPUs. You can play this on a GPU that, like in this video, is 13 years old, as well as a brand new GPU. And you can really see kind of the progression of how GPUs have gone. And, really this game is optimized really well. And that's really what you're looking for when you're trying to do product reviews. All right, so we're running this at 1280 by 720. We are running this at 100%. Oh, it's at 99. Let's go to 100% render resolution. Not 100, there we go. And everything else is going to be as low as we can possibly be. Our FOV is cranked a little bit. That's just because we're on a smaller monitor, so, obviously you want it to be playable, so you're going to crank your FOV, so that's totally fine. I probably want to save this stuff, don't I? There we go. All right, and, we're in the practice range here, but there's a lot going on. There's actually quite a few people in here, so this is going to be pretty representative of what gameplay is going to be like, and we're running pretty well. This is actually quite playable. There is definitely a little bit of, it's not super clear, but you're running on a 13-year-old graphics card. What are you going to expect, right? Looks like we're using about 10 gigs of RAM. Again, that's not super vindicative to what our performance is, but my guess is that some of that RAM is actually probably going to the GPU here. We're using about 900 megabytes of our gigabyte of RAM, right? So about 1,000 megabytes. And so I'm going to guess that we're going over that a little bit, and maybe some RAM is going to be in there as well. You can see we're almost pegged at 100% for GPU utilization, and temperatures are still great. You can see our core clock and memory clock are both boosted at the moment, so we're at almost 100% utilization. It's kind of jumping around that 95 to 100% mark on utilization there. And yeah, I mean, we're getting around 50 FPS. When we're on open spots or looking up in the sky or whatever, we can get much higher. But realistically, in playable areas, I mean, this is a pretty densely packed area. We're getting 50 FPS. And I mean, realistically, again, if you're playing on a 13-year-old card, this is way more than you should be expecting from this game. This game came out in 2017, and this is a 2011 card. So this is absolutely playable in my book. Obviously, this is not going to be like, running on a brand new nice PC, right? But honestly, for a GTX 560, running 50 FPS in PUBG is absolutely playable. I consider this a win. Right, so another one that we're going to look at here is Banished. Now, Banished, again, well, geez, I should just say it. All these games that are going to be on this list are not super heard of, but I'm absolutely okay with that. Through my testing, this is pretty indicative of what esports titles are going to be like. We're getting around 200 FPS here. This game came out around the same time that the card came out. It's medieval city builder kind of thing. But this is again going to be pretty vindicative of what CS:GO is going to get if you're playing Dota or that kind of stuff. This game is going to be pretty. It's going to really pretty show what you're going to get for those games as well. I've noticed that FPS differences are anywhere from I guess in the high case probably 40 FPS differences to around 2 or 3. So. Especially compared to like Dota or League of Legends and stuff, it's going to be really comparative to this. CS:GO will be similar, but it will be you'll get a little less for CS:GO. But yeah, this game runs great. As you can see, we're getting over 200 FPS. Super playable. Again, this is a game that came out just around the same time, and yeah, we'll go ahead and move on. All right, and of course, you can't have a game benchmark without having Half-Life 2 in here somewhere. So you can see that we're getting way over playable FPS, of course, like everything does nowadays. We're getting about 260 FPS. So again, this is going to be a win on this part. I know this was a short segment, but it's Half-Life 2 from a 2011 card. What do you expect? We'll go ahead and now get on to the conclusion. You've made it to the conclusion. Nice job. You stuck around. Now, I do want to point out before I kind of get to the closing thoughts about the GTX 560 that, of course, this hasn't been a super high quality or super high production value production, right? You know, I'm not a multi-million-dollar company that can make these hardware reviews. But you know what? I hope that you enjoyed this. This has been a real review. I've shared my true thoughts, and I've done at least a little bit of research, I hope, into what I need to know for this review. If you want, you know, this to continue and you want more of these videos, please subscribe or leave a comment or like or do whatever you want. Maybe even just watch this again, I don't know, in the background. But anyway, let's get to the closing thoughts now. I won't say any more about that, trust me. The GTX 560, now it's kind of cool, you know, we tend to think about these kind of cards, especially 13 years ago, as kind of obsolete now. You know, you can get a lot of really cheap options, especially used. You know, you can get the new Intel B580 for new $250, you know, and that's going to have really good performance, price to performance value. You know, you can get these for 40, 50 bucks now, the GTX 560 used. And it's cool to see how these older cards that are kind of generally being forgotten now, how they're still usable. You know, we saw in the test that a lot of these new games, you can still run these on. Now, obviously you're not going to be playing Call of Duty or Fortnite on this thing, right? But a lot of those games that maybe are niche games or things that, you know, maybe they're cult classics, maybe you just play esports titles. I did run CSGO on here, but I couldn't get the overlay to work. And so, unfortunately, I didn't want to put that in the video, obviously, if it's not going to be full, at least high quality to what my standards are. I also couldn't record OBS on this system. I wanted to record an overlay, but that just didn't work out, so I just recorded it with my phone, as you saw. But hey, you know, next time we're going to be looking at this card. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but maybe you'll guess. Maybe take a guess in the comments, right? So this is what we're going to be looking at next time. I'll give you a little hint. It has one 6-pin power connector. I'm not going to show you anything else. We're going to be talking about that next time. A little bit of a newer card, okay? So leave your guesses in the comments. And hey, again, my name is Gray, and I'm a nerd just like you hopefully are. And hey, we'll see you in the next video.